again, welcome to another episode of the LOOR Entertainment Podcast, and I am joined once again by LOOR executive Jon Speed. Jon, again, welcome back. You just can't get enough of me, man.
No, man, it's a good addiction.
This is going to be a fun episode. As some of you know, we've tried an episode or two. What's called a Pastor React. Now, some of you may have seen on YouTube technique critique videos. That's where you'll have real firemen judging or critiquing movies about firemen, or real detectives critiquing movies and television shows about real detectives, and what's fact and what's fiction. Well, I will say that Pastor Doug Wilson, he does some critiquing mostly on viral videos and statements from people. But I haven't seen pastors really deconstruct movies and films, TV shows that depict Christianity or Jesus or God or things within the Christian sphere. And so we're pioneering that ground here. And today, Jon Speed is with us, and perhaps one of the best people that could be with us. And we are going to be looking at the 1977 comedy classic, Oh God. Now, some of you might be saying, what? I know, because it's from 1977. It's a whole other century. And entertainment was pretty good back then. And we're trying to bring good entertainment back at LOOR. Well, by the way, make sure you subscribe at LOOR.tv. In fact, let me bring up that banner. I forgot to do that. Subscribe today. I don't want you to forget. Subscribe at LOOR.tv today. Fund the stories, the films that Hollywood wouldn't. But today we're going to look at one of those films that Hollywood did fund. And it's called Oh God. It stars George Burns. Now, once again, some of you say, who's George Burns? He was one of the greatest comedians of the 20th century. It also stars John Denver. Some of you will say, who's John Denver? He was one of the greatest songwriters of the 20th century. Anyway, so we're giving you a history lesson and a theology lesson right here today. We're going to be looking at three categories for this film: theological accuracy. Normally, we'd add historical accuracy, but this is not a historical film, so that one is not applicable. And then entertainment value. And so, without further ado, Jon, are you ready for this?
I think I'm ready. We'll find out.
Okay, let me bring up the first clip here. This is where George Burns encounters John Denver's character, and he's telling him what his mission is for the next little while. So here
Why
we go.
me? Why not you? You mean there's no special?
Life is a crapshoot. Like the millionth customer who crosses a bridge gets to shake hands with the governor. You thought I picked you because you're better than everybody?
I'm not?
You're better than some, but not as good as others. But you crossed the bridge at the right time.
If you wanted to see me,
stop it.
why didn't you just appear?
All right, what you got here?
All right, so I'm looking at this theologically, right? So
Yep.
First of all, we got George Burns is a dude. He's a man, not like just like pronoun man, but I mean like a physical body, right? So we've got an issue right out of the gate with George Burns. God is a spirit, John chapter 4. They that worship him must worship him in spirit and truth. So I'm looking at theology here right out of the gate. We have a problem. And
now,
then,
can I ask you this? Can I ask this question before you? Old Testament, the angel, pre-incarnate, Jesus Christ. Then we have New Testament, Jesus, and Jesus says, I am the image of the invisible. So would this not be theologically Jesus if they're going to be more consistent?
Yeah, I guess if they wanted to be, I'm sure they don't care, but, but yeah, this is I guess.
I'm not trying to defend them. I'm just saying it would be.
I know. Right. If you're looking at it, you could do that. You can say, well, all right, so this is Jesus. But we know that it's not, because that's not Jim Caviezel or
that's true.
or Rumi, right? That would be, obviously Jesus is God incarnate. But yeah, they're not going there with that.
All right.
And then life is a crapshoot. That's the other thing that I want to catch. It's not a crapshoot. There's, God decrees things, and it's not random at all. It's planned for everything's detailed out for his glory. Now, there's theological debates that can get started with that, but nevertheless, the scriptures are clear that God decrees things, and so it's not a crapshoot.
All right, let me give you a few more bits out of this scene, because there's a couple more things, because this is good to set up who the writers think God is. And but here's the thing, John, you'll know this too. This kind of understanding about God is not foreign to professing Christians either. Right. And so let's pay attention to some of that as we continue.
Okay.
Over my bed.
Hollywood. Next question.
People are always praying to you. Do you listen?
I can't help hearing. I don't always listen.
Then you don't care?
Of course I care. I care plenty. But what can I do?
What can you do? You're God.
Only for the big picture. I don't get into details.
I want to stop it here, and I know you got something here too. This is something, but here it is though. Like, I mean, I've heard that from Christians too, where God's big picture, or God helps those who help themselves. People think that's in the Bible, or I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength, except quote this verse in context. And that's again, a big picture God, everything's up to me, or God won't give me more than I can handle. Same thing, not in the Bible. That's 2 Corinthians 10:13. God won't tempt you beyond what you can bear, and if he does, you provide a way out. That's a whole different context than the situation. I can handle the situation, and therefore, if I'm not handling the situation, somehow something is wrong with me, or something is wrong with my faith, or God's punishing me, or whatever. But this is a contradiction that I see a lot in depictions of God in movies. Or even just explaining God as a God of a big picture and he's not in the details. Problem is, if he wasn't in the details, why would he be in this guy's bathroom? Why would he be asking him to do a specific thing to get a specific result if he didn't care about specific details? Like, just what they're doing contradicts that. And I think that's one of the things, that's one of the that's one of the unavoidable truths about God. We can try to deny it, but our actions and even what we do, it proves that he is involved in the details. I don't know. Go ahead.
Right. Yeah, no, you've got that. And when you've got this idea that he only deals, with the larger scale, and it's almost like a deist perspective, pretty close.
Maybe Thomas Jefferson would have appreciated that.
Right. That you created everything, got everything spinning and going in motion, but then he's hands off after that. Right. And that's sort of what they're portraying here, is sort of a deist. At least that's the words out of his mouth are deist. But like you say, the fact he's in the bathroom is not a deist thing. So, but I mean, if we stop it there too, okay, these are the theological problems, but entertainment value, it's a fascinating idea, right? I mean, the idea, God shows up and asks me to do something, and I'm having this conversation with God. I mean, everybody wants to have a conversation with. They'd love it if God showed up. They think they would love it anyway. It appeals to people's imagination. If God showed up, there wouldn't be anything like that. They would be floored. They'd be flabbergasted. They'd be repentant in an awareness of his holiness. Right. But entertainment wise, it's an interesting concept.
And if God could show up in this way, or would show, and it would work out like this in your bathroom while you just finish your shower and you're shaving, right? Well, I do think one thing that is accurate is the questions John Denver is asking are questions people ask every single day about God. Yep. And so that is something I think that's accurate. And there's a couple more that I want to hear in this clip, and then we'll move to another one.
Whatever happens to us
happens. Here, I put in a new blade.
Details.
I mean, there's no plan, no scheme to guide our destinies.
A lot of it is luck.
Luck?
I gave you a world and everything in it. It's all up to you.
But we need help.
That's why I gave you each other.
But if you're so involved with us, how can you permit all the suffering that goes on in the world?
How can I permit the suffering?
Yeah.
I don't permit the suffering. You do. Free will. All the choices are yours.
Choices? What choices?
You can love each other, cherish and nurture each other. You can kill each other.
I want to get you right there, because why is there pain and suffering? I asked that question. There's a someone I'm discipling now who asked me that question about stuff going on. And, so we got into the problem of sin, the problem of suffering, the problem of evil. Even Christians who believe in Jesus and are consistent with their theology, we're going to have that. It is a problem. Speak to this a little bit.
Yeah, it's a tough question in the sense that we're emotionally involved with all of the pain and suffering. It's not just a theoretical thing. But I mean, just biblically speaking, the pain and suffering all began at the garden with rebellion of man against the laws of God. Sin and death comes into the world. You got to earn your living by the sweat of your brow. And there's pain in childbirth and all these things. And then all the death and misery that goes with that. It's just part of the sinful condition of humanity. And it kind of goes along with what he's getting at, what they're getting at here with free will. I don't make any bones about where I stand theologically. I believe I'm a Calvinist. Mm-hmm. I believe in total depravity. And when it comes to free will, what people will do is they will choose between, some selfish thing and another selfish thing, or sin A and sin B, but they're not going to choose God in that free will. And so, it's true enough that a lot of the pain and the suffering happens because of bad, sinful decisions that we're making with that unfettered, so to speak, free will that doesn't choose God. They're insinuating that you can, that if you just made better choices, that there would be no pain and suffering. That's just not going to happen based on what the scriptures teach, like in Romans 3, 9 through 18 or so, about human nature, where our feet are quick to shed blood. Where the poison of asps is under our lips. It's
well. Wouldn't it also lend to that end that you have Jeremiah, the heart is desperately wicked and deceitful above all things. Who can know it? You have James talking about we invent our own sins that come out of our hearts, and so there is a lot of scriptural basis that we do that ourselves, and we'll choose it ourselves if not for God breaking in and saving us.
Right.
All right, here's another clip. It is, so he wants more proof that God is really God.
I see you know a lot of things, and you've been making a lot of things happen, but none of it seems
Godlike?
Yeah, godlike.
And what to you would be godlike?
Change the weather.
Special effects, huh? What would you like? A little earthquake? A small hurricane?
Well, no. I wouldn't want anybody hurt. I was just thinking maybe, what about a little rain?
Little rain?
Yeah, a small shower.
One small shower, you got it.
Hey, it's raining. You made it rain. You didn't even bat an eye. You didn't have to lift a finger.
Rain's not that hard.
It's unbelievable.
Would you like it to rain a little harder?
No, this is fine.
How about bigger drops?
No, this is fine.
Would you care for a little snow?
I don't believe it. Hey, it's not raining outside. It's just in here.
Why'd you spoil everybody's day?
This is fantastic. It's just.
All right, man. I got to hear your thoughts right here, man. We see this a lot when God proves himself in the movies. It's always the miracles, which actually, that is not unlike when he was before Herod on his trials. Prove to me that you're the Son of God, all these kinds of things. So that's not, and we do it ourselves. Prove that you're God, prove that you're God. And what we want to see is a parlor trick. We want to see, his best David Blaine impression, as if that's going to change our minds. Yeah. But at the same time, he can do things, but also his miracles have a purpose, and they were for a specific purpose, and they weren't just for your amusement. All right, speak a little bit to this if you can.
Yeah, so the miracles, Well, the whole story of Lazarus and the rich man, right? When they're in, Lazarus is in paradise, rich man is in torments, and he's like, send someone back. Let me go back and warn them. Mm-hmm. Let me go back and warn my brothers about this. And Jesus says, unless they've got Moses and the prophets, let them hear them. If they won't hear the word of God, a miracle won't convince them. And, that is certainly a prevalent idea in certain circles of Christianity these days. That it's been that way for a while, that if you have miracles, then that will cause people to believe, right? And so, it just doesn't work that way, because what happens, right? Well, if you're watching this film, you got a rainstorm inside of a car, and people will just look at that and go, well, that's obviously fake. Well, the same thing happens with the miracles in the Bible. When atheists come up against those, what do? They come out, well, Jesus was just really good at sleight of hand or whatever. He walked on the water. He's like you say, David Blaine, he has something worked out there. They've got to be convinced, not by their eyesight, but by the truth of what the Word of God says about who Christ is. But
all right,
I will say on the entertainment side of things, that's just funny stuff. And George Burns, you see there a little bit why he's really great at a dry, you know what I mean? Sort of dry rainfall, but just delivering a dry line, in the middle of a rainstorm, he can even do it.
Yeah. Okay, let's go. This is a scene of some theological questions. So what happens is John Denver's character is bringing God's message to his community, right? And nobody believes him. The newspapers won't pick him up, blah, blah, blah. They all think he's crazy. Now, that is pretty accurate. We bring the message of God all the time. People think we're nuts. So, we've seen that throughout Scripture. That'll be how it is. He then sits down with a table of theologians, and they want to give him a bunch of questions to ask God. So here are the theologians vetting and grilling John Denver.
You have demonstrated over the years an astonishing lack of interest in spiritual matters.
It strikes me, as one who has actually heard his voice,
it's Paul Sorvino,
that you have virtually no prerequisites to make direct contact with the Almighty whatsoever.
You've heard him?
He has made his word known to me.
What was he wearing?
I know his word through the Scriptures. It would be blasphemy to suggest that we could describe the Creator in human terms.
Why? If he created us, why wouldn't he appear to us as one of us?
Don't you Don't you, young man, try to teach this assemblage the role of the deity. Rabbi Silverstone, my good and great friend, brother in the work of the Lord, with whom we have broke bread many times.
I just got to pause it right here. I want to continue. This actually happens too. Mm-hmm. The interfaith stuff where they try to come up with answers, but at that table they don't agree who Jesus is and who God is. So there's no way they're going to have any consistent line of questioning. I always find that interesting.
Yeah. But,
all right, here we go.
Is a pillar of the American Jew community. Bishop Reardon represents millions of Roman Catholics. Bishop Marcos, multitudes of Greek Orthodoxers. And while we have virtually every religious persuasion represented here today, and I personally have been chosen to render the benediction at this year's Super Bowl.
Good luck.
Mr. Landers, we really find insufficient documentation to support your claim.
But you're not saying it didn't happen.
No, we are saying there is insufficient documentation, which puts the score at God 7, you zip.
We have decided, however, out of a sense of fairness and ecclesiastical curiosity, to allow you to present us with certain evidence?
What evidence?
We have assembled a set of questions for you to ask God. There are 50 questions.
50. You want me to get God to take a quiz?
So here's something else that I've seen too, because I planted a church. I know you're a church planter too, and I've also worked to help coach pastors and church planters and so on and so forth. And there are you get together and you do have people that advise and they provide counsel and guidance and so on. But one of the things I always found interesting was because when we really preach Christ and Him crucified, it doesn't put the butts in the seats necessarily, which if you go to a standard church conference, they're going to tell you how to put butts in seats. Yeah. I mean, that's what it is. And it's going to be a group like that that'll all sit around and their aim is something else other than I really want to know who God is. And at least at the table in that scene I'm talking about. But I see a similar thing where they were looking more at what is your prerequisite and why would God talk to you and all this other stuff. And one of the things I asked at one of the church planting conferences was, they were talking about, if you lose members, et cetera, then you must be doing something wrong and you have to go and you have to find out why. And I'm paraphrasing and making it short for time. But what I'm always reminded of there is John 6, where after He feeds the 5,000 and Jesus goes across the lake and they follow Him over and they want more sourdough. And He says, I am the bread, and they say, no, this teaching is too hard. And they all desert Him, Him being Jesus. And he lets them go. Like today, we would look at that and say, what's wrong with you? Like, why are you letting them go? What did you do wrong? Next week, you should have a different delivery. And there is kind of that theological, it's not pride, arrogance, theological arrogance that we think we can get this down to a science and we know, and here's the package, just like there are 50 questions. And, here's 5 minutes to raising your church giving, or here's this, that, and the other. And I think that actually was represented fairly well there, but I think you kind of have to be a nerd in the weeds to pull that out. Right. Your thoughts on that? And then we've got kind of a part 2 to that.
Yeah. I mean, what you're saying there, it's almost like Jesus could benefit from a church growth course. Yeah. He's the head of the church, but he's not really doing it right. We could correct him.
Have you read this book yet? We'd ask him. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Have you taken my course or whatever? Yeah. That's true. That's very true. And, like you say, if you've been to any pastoral meetings, especially if you've ever sat in on any ecumenical thing, all of that, that's why it makes it so funny when he does the orthodoxer thing. Because there's like people that go to those things that it's clear they're not used to even talking to these people at all, but now they're all getting together to make decisions on life-changing things. And but it's a funny scene. Whoever wrote that, I don't know who wrote it, but whoever wrote that had some familiarity with how those things go.
All right. So this is a part 2 to that. And I think it's Hollywood has 2 versions of Christians. There's the Catholic Christian, which is usually what you see because they're always wearing their habit and everything, or the habit's the nuns, but they're always wearing they're in their getup and they're in their empty church and that kind of thing, or empty cathedral, I should say. And then there is the holy rollers, and those would be the closest to the Protestants that typically are represented in Hollywood. And here is that pastor there, I believe is Reverend Williams in the movie, played by the late great Paul Sorvino, and John Denver brings back the questions to him and interrupts his church service.
The Bible tells us that God knows the falling of a sparrow and the depth of a pocket, and that is what I'm talking about. Come up, brothers and sisters, and put in our hands what you would put in God's hands, and He will have the whole world in His hands.
He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands.
Thank you very much. May the Lord bless and keep you. It's so good to see you. Thank you. You can put that right. Yes. Thank you very much. God bless you. May the Lord always bless you and keep you. It's so good to see you. Thank you. Please keep moving. Reverend Williams. That's all right. That's all right. This man is doing to me. What are you doing here?
God sent me to you.
One moment. One moment. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, this is the young man who has used so much energy to convince everyone that he has seen God. Now wait. Would you repeat what you just said to me?
God sent me to you.
God sent him to me. Are you certain of that?
Yes, I just left him. He wanted me to give you these answers to all of those questions.
God specified me?
Yes. And he also asked me to tell you that he's very unhappy.
God is very unhappy.
Yes, he's unhappy that you're getting rich this way, and that he'd like you to stop pretending that you're spreading his word. In fact, he suggested that you sell shoes.
Jesse!
And that's what he said. You're a thief.
This poor...
All right. So there's a little bit in there. There's the harpooning of the church service, but what are some of your initial thoughts here?
Well, I'm kind of taking the whole thing together along with what he's saying there, but the idea that they're just really tearing apart the idea that God's in control of anything, all through the clips that we've seen here, and then even the decision to he's got the whole world in his hands. All this, it's meant to attack the idea of the sovereignty of God, and I think that people like that. I like to do that. They like to attack that idea. Because we want to be in control of everything, and it's a lot easier if we can blame it on ourselves than if we can blame it. Yeah, if we can take credit for everything that goes wrong in the world or right in the world, people would rather have that than have a God who's actually in control of disasters, right?
Why do you? I got one more clip. We've got a few minutes left, but why do you think? Why does that juxtaposition, that duality exists? We can't. Can we really not fathom a God that's in control of disasters too? Does that go to the objection of why would a good God allow evil? Is that along those lines? And we just don't want to face that.
We just don't want to face it. I did a fair amount of street preaching up in New York State when I was church planning up there. I do a lot of it still. And the thing is there are people that will say, where was God on 9/11? Right? Where was God? I had that question come up when I was preaching after a Syracuse University game. And I said, where was God on 9/11? He was where he's always been. He's seated on his throne. And that fact ought to cause you to fear him and to reverence him and to consider what he says, about eternal life and about all these things, not just have these questions, these doubts about who he is and his goodness. He's in control of those things. Now, I'm not saying he flew the planes into the buildings, but I am saying he certainly allowed it. And a holy, righteous God allowing that kind of thing to happen ought to give us all pause to say, my life isn't really secure because I sin against God and he's in control of everything. That ought to give me a minute to pause and to consider my own ways, as the Bible says, consider your ways. And it's even Christians will talk like this. Well, we don't know what happened here. We don't know why these things happen. Actually, the Bible does say why they happen. On one hand, we're sinful. On the other hand, God's in control. So those are the reasons why things happen. And what we ought to do, instead of being prideful and questioning him, we ought to submit to the gospel and believe it.
Okay, one more clip and we'll wrap up the deconstruction of "Oh God, oh my." Yeah. Okay, here's the wrap up, the This is a theological rose with no bloom, but here we go.
Oh boy.
Hello? Where are you?
Turn around. Well, how do you like it? I'm going on a trip to spend a little time with animals. I like animals. And sometimes I don't spend enough time with them.
We failed, didn't we?
What are you talking? We did terrific. I gave a message of encouragement. You passed it along. Now we'll see. You did good. We both did good. What covered?
You think anybody got the message?
You think we have enough apples in the world?
Apples?
We got all the apples we need. You're Johnny Appleseed. You drop a few seeds and you move on. If the seeds are good, they'll take root. I gave you great seeds, the best.
I lost my job, you know.
There are other cities, other supermarkets.
Everybody thinks I'm a nut.
Galileo, Pasteur, Einstein, Columbus. You're in good company. Hold on. Well, better be going.
Aren't you coming back?
No.
Ever?
Whenever comes, we'll see.
Sometimes, now and then, couldn't we just talk?
I'll tell you what. You talk, I'll listen.
How touching. And his dad leaves the family and never returns home. That's kind of how they portray him. That's the view of God. Is he's a deadbeat dad, really.
Yeah.
Except he can't help but be involved in his kids' lives. But of course, we're theologically muddy there. But okay, so what do you think is the theological message and picture of God from Oh God?
Well, you know, it goes back to the whole thing we said at the beginning. He's traveling, right? So he's off to go see other things. Well, God's omnipresent, and he doesn't need to travel somewhere to go see animals, right? And so there's that. But what they're doing is they're just trying to make God look like us. You know, it's the whole. If you do look at Roman mythology and Greek mythology, that's largely just glorified versions of us. This one's not so even glorified. You know, you don't really have thunderbolts coming out of his fingertips or anything quite, although it seems like he caused a rainstorm in the car. You know, that's not the whole film, but I think this is the kind of God people like to have, honestly. They would like to have a grandfatherly sort of God who offers good advice, says nice things, encourages you, and like you say, just goes on his way. They don't want to.
That's an interesting picture. I mean, that would be kind of like our stereotypical grandparent. Like we'd hang out with them in the holidays and maybe some weekends, but they go away ultimately, and they're not directly involved, and they don't really have any direct agency or control, sovereignty over our lives. So I guess it would be kind of a God in our image in this case.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Rather than him creating us in his, we're creating him in ours. In Hollywood, that's what they're doing. And I'll just apply this a little bit. That's why we got to be so careful when we're talking about depictions of God, whether you're talking about God the Father or Jesus, that we don't try to emphasize the humanity so much that we miss the fact that he is truly God. And I think some of the recent efforts, and, you know, I've been a critic of The Chosen for a while, but that those things like he gets us, that emphasis or that ad campaign and The Chosen, they're emphasizing the humanity of Jesus to the almost the total exclusion of his deity. And in a very similar way, you're, you know, not as blasphemously, right? Not as in your face, but still it's subtle. And it's that subtle stuff that I think is actually more dangerous than this kind of thing, because it gets people slowly thinking differently about Christ rather than as he's revealed in Scripture.
Do you think that, like the writers of Oh God, for example, do you think that some of those things, the subtle things, the denial of deity, how much of that, we can't look into people's hearts and we can't go in the past and ask them, but how much of that do you think is on purpose because we rebel against God, or if we don't belong to him?
Yeah, I think so. And I think if you think back to that time frame, what did you say that was made? The 70s?
77, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Hollywood in the 70s was a mess. They were pushing as many envelopes, and into the 80s, they were pushing the envelope as far as they could, and they were being very deliberate. Like, we want to strike back at traditional sort of Christianity, traditional America. And, you're seeing it now amped up times 100 with all the woke stuff and LGBT and everything. That's been part of it. And so back then that was lower scale, but now this is where that kind of thing leads, right? I mean, after 30, 40 years, this is where we are now in Hollywood.
So here's the go-home question, my friend. How is LOOR and LOOR.tv a response, a safeguard, a solution to, and the antithesis in a good way of that kind of storytelling?
Yeah, I mean, what we tell the creators is you love God and make what you want. We give them a lot of freedom, more so than like a Pure Flix or some of the other Christian streamers. So on the one hand, we're doing that, but it starts with loving God. And if you love God and you have respect to his commands and you have respect to the word of God and the gospel, you're going to portray him rightly and actually teach truth. We want stories that are true and beautiful and good, and that don't tell lies about who God is. And so while that's not always clean and tidy, it can be messy when human sin is involved. As long as it's being depicted as sinful, I think even that can glorify God in a right way to show this is what life without God is like, as long as it's not glorifying, filth or something like that.
I think that's another reason why God has inspired LOOR and the platform of LOOR and the business of LOOR and the ministry of LOOR in you and Marcus and Jason and all the team and connecting you with these different storytellers and producers and writers and animators, because we that as Christians need this kind of true presence. And you mentioned on a previous podcast that LOOR isn't exactly a free speech platform, because it's not an anything goes platform.
Right.
And there is a biblical standard of truth that applies to all projects, and that's going to filter them. And projects that don't adhere to that won't be supported. So that Oh God wouldn't get made the way that was. Right. But perhaps there's a different way in the future somehow that can be done. At any rate, let's get to the evaluation. I have an idea what you're going to say, but we'll do it anyway. What is the theological accuracy, 1 to 10, 1 being not, 10 being that was incredible, ripped from the pages of our sacred texts? What say you?
Oh man, I mean, you're like, can I give it a 1? I mean, I'm not even sure, but it's pretty bad. Yeah.
All right. And how about entertainment value? Is there anything in there for entertainment that's a good time?
I mean, if you're watching, anytime you're watching George Burns, I mean, I remember as a kid watching him when he was still alive, thinking, how does this guy still have the ability to pull this off? And he's really brilliant. And John Denver there, I mean, he does in those clips, he's definitely communicating the sort of, I don't know how to say it. I want to say gullible. I'm not sure if that's really right.
Maybe naivete a little bit or something.
Yeah, right. That's a good word. You see that, and he does a great job with that. Part of it. So you got good acting there. And I think you can watch something like that and go, okay, well, I totally reject the theology, but there's some good acting going on there you can learn from.
All right. Eat the meat, spit out the bones. All right. Well, that's our Pastor Reacts of Oh God with the LOOR Entertainment Podcast. Thank you, Jon, for spending the time, and hope you enjoyed it. If you like this kind of programming, this kind of nonsensical, whimsical fun, let us know. You can let us know in the comments, whatever platform you're watching this podcast. If you want to see us dissect another movie about God or Christianity or Jesus, let us know. We'll do requests. We will play requests. All right, all night long. Anyway, thanks again, Jon, for being on the show. For Jon, I'm Andrew Southwick. This has been the LOOR Entertainment Podcast. We'll see you next time.